What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. We are coming off a intense padded Monday practice that was a ton of fun, and there is a lot to go over. So we are going to jump in right away. There are a variety of different ways where I could go with this and what I want to start with today, but I want to start with Jaire Alexander because I've mentioned this already in training camp that there maybe haven't been a ton of Jaire Alexander highlight plays because nobody has been stupid enough to throw at Jaire Alexander. That continues to be the case for the most part. He has been an absolutely shut down cornerback throughout the course of training camp so far. His presence on defense has been immensely felt on the defensive side. For the plus on the offensive side, you can tell that they're not exactly thrilled probably to be going against Jair every day in practice, but he set the tone so early in this practice. It started with one-on-ones, and we had a couple matchups with Romeo Dobbs. Jair got the best of the first one. The second one was incomplete. We'll talk about that one a little bit more later, but the first one that was really, really impressive and one of the just, wow moments of the day was Jaire Alexander one-on-one with Sammy Watkins. Now, the beautiful part of this is that Jaire Alexander was kind of like coming back from another play, and it looked like it was going to be Sammy Watkins versus KB and Ento. And I couldn't tell if Watkins was like the one that wanted Alexander, or if Alexander's just like, no, I'm going to take this rep. It was tough to tell, but either way, basically Ento gets pushed to the side, and Jair goes one-on-one with Sammy Watkins, and he's up on press coverage. And let's just be clear, these are one-on-ones, wide receiver versus cornerback, and the advantage is immensely in the wide receiver's favors in these drills. And it just is what it is, right? There's so many different ways you can go. You have no safety help. You have no inside help. It's just one-on-one on an island, except this is Jair Island, right? And he gets up and he presses Sammy Watkins, gets in his face. There's some good hand fighting, and he so anticipates the route that he runs the route for Sammy Watkins. And I heard some people like, well, yeah, they know the route tree and Green Bay. No, this is a one-on-one, Watkins has the ability to release. Jair read this so perfectly, jammed him, got inside of him, then ran the route for Sammy Watkins, jumped the route, and should have had an interception. The only imperfection on the play was the fact that Jair didn't come down with the interception and ultimately dropped it. But my goodness, I can't remember a time in any one-on-one period that I've ever seen where a corner ran the route basically for the wide receiver so perfectly and just listen, Jaire Alexander is the better football player than Sammy Watkins. Let's be totally clear here, right? But there are some real advantages that Sammy Watkins has over Jaire Alexander, and just pure strength and size is one of those advantages. And Jair basically jammed him, out-physicaled him, got inside of him, and made the play on the ball. It was an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful play by Alexander, and that was just a piece of it. He was shut down in one-on-ones. He was shut down during the course of the day in practice. And him being that shutdown corner is clearly helpful to the defense, right? But that is just a piece of it. His intensity, there was a pass breakup that he had against Romeo Dobbs early in one-on-ones, and he was jawing with Dobbs and getting the defense fired up. And that intensity, that energy that Ja brings to the table day in and day out, he set the tone in this practice, and it didn't stop for the remainder of practice. That's what Jaire Alexander can bring to the table. This isn't just about getting one of the best cornerbacks in the league back, which is by far and away a huge aspect in and of itself. But this is also getting a real, one of the key players in the hearts of the team and the energy of the team back on the field and getting everyone else pumped up and excited around him. His impact is going to be immense this season, not just in coverage, but the energy and the intensity and the tone setting that he brings to the table with how he goes about his business is going to be, there's going to be a trickle-down effect for the rest of the defense. There's no two ways about it. And I think, quite frankly, that I said this on Twitter. I said, I think people are underestimating the value of what Jaire Alexander is going to totally bring to the team this season. And everyone's like, not everyone, but a couple of people are like, nobody's underestimating Jaire Alexander. That's not what I'm saying. I don't think anyone's necessarily underestimating Jaire Alexander, but I do think they're underestimating that it's not just this all-pro shutdown corner. It's also the heartbeat of the defense. And we got a great glimpse of that on Monday, and exactly the intensity and the energy and the heart that he brings to the defense. He set the tone, and it was over for the rest of practice. Defense dominated. We'll touch more on that in just a moment, but it was Ja that set the tone. Now, before I talk about this next player, Geron Reid, who had a phenomenal day, which we will discuss, I do think this is worth mentioning here, right? Because I want to be abundantly crystal clear here. Super Bowls and All-Pro designations and any other accolade or award are not won on day 11 of training camp. And I think it's worth bringing up even last season. For example, Robert Tonyan unequivocally was the star of training camp a season ago. This wasn't just me. This was a variety of beat writers and reporters talking about how phenomenal Tonyan was. He caught everything that went his way. It looked like he was going to have this just epic breakout season, even more than he had in 2020. What happens? He comes out slow out of the gates, drops some passes that he never drops, doesn't have the same production, and then, of course, has the injury after that. And, you know, it was a disappointing season for Robert Tonyan, even prior to the injury. At least up until the injury, right? Maybe he would have had a phenomenal second half of the season. We just don't know, but it did not live up to what we saw in training camp. On the flip side, Eric Stokes was borderline, like, not terrible, but like pretty close to terrible at times, especially for like at this point, like the first 11 practices of training camp. Stokes was all over the place. And a lot of that was due to having to go against Davante Adams a lot and the offense throwing a bunch of different things at Eric Stokes. But if you would have told me after those 11 practices that Stokes just never really put it together in his rookie season and sort of had to go back to the drawing board in year two, just based off of what we saw in those first 11 practices, I would have been like, yeah, I could see how that could have happened. But Stokes goes on to start a bunch of games, have a phenomenal rookie season, and now looks like he's, you know, already coming into his own in year two and taking another step. So because somebody is tearing up training camp like Tonyan did a season ago doesn't mean that they're going to have the most phenomenal year. And just because somebody is struggling at this point in training camp doesn't mean that they're going to have a bad year. There's nothing that is crowned at this point. And I just want to be very clear about that because to me, this is all exciting and fun to talk about. And it's great to see these first impressions. It's great to see who's trending in the right direction. But this is an incredibly long season that includes preseason, regular season, postseason, etc. And there are going to be ebbs and flows for all of these players. One of the ebbs today, I guess would be the valley, right, was for Romeo Dobbs. And like I said, we'll talk about that in a little bit more in detail. But, you know, I think he had his first sort of like rookie day today where it sort of came back to life a little bit. And all of those things are going to happen throughout the course of training camp. So Jarran Reed, getting into this conversation here, had a phenomenal day today to stack already what has been what I think is a fantastic training camp by Jarran Reed through 11 practices. He has caught, I think, everyone's eye. He has been consistently in the backfield more than any other defensive lineman, Kenny Clark included. He is disrupting. He is getting run stop after run stop. Like I said, constantly in the backfield, getting pressures. He looks like a totally different player than he was through his NFL career so far. And I've compared him a little bit to Devondre, like saying like the hope here is that he's a Devondre Campbell, right? Super talented player who hasn't quite put it together yet, who gets a 1-year prove-it deal, and now hopefully can go out and now maybe live up to those original expectations in the right place at the right spot at the right time in the right scheme, just like Devondre Campbell was a season ago, just like Rasul Douglas was a season ago. And so far, the fit with Jarran Reed has seemed phenomenal. Now, the reason I said that precursor before is we'll see what that amounts to in the regular season. And I think we should be cautious because overall through the course of his career, he's been up and down, more average than certainly spectacular. But he has been at times spectacular in training camp and no better version of that than what we saw on day 11 on Monday of training camp. These were my notes. So like every time I tweet something, it's because I saw Jarran Reed do something fantastic. These were my notes as I was tweeting out through the course of the day. Jarran Reed, nice job resetting the line of scrimmage. Jarran Reed active again this morning. Jarran Reed with another stop at the line of scrimmage. Jarran Reed with a would-be sack on Rodgers. Good Lord, Jarran Reed, have a damn day. Just spun off a double team for a stop on A.J. Dillon. Like 5 different instances. Remember, it's not like I showed up for the day and I'm like, all right, here we go, just watching Geron Reid today. Like, if I watch tape, like obviously as I go through the regular season and I watch every single player on every single play, right? If I watch 60 plays of Geron Reid and I got those 5 takeaways from it, if he had 5 plays like that in a 60 play setting, I would have been like, man, Geron Reid had a good day. Just by happenstance of watching a couple play, obviously going through the course of the day and watching practice, I caught 5 different Jarran Reed plays where he was either making an impact at the behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, or making a run stop just slightly beyond the line of scrimmage. Like, just an incredible day. And the play where he basically didn't just eat a double team, right? It's one thing if you are getting double teamed and you just hold your ground. That is a massive win for any defensive lineman. But the fact that he's holding his ground against a double team, spins out of it, and then makes a stop on AJ Dillon was an incredible play. And the would-be sack on Rodgers was a little bit of a coverage sack. But again, he's the one that's hustling, getting in the backfield and making that play. He was fantastic on Monday. And this has been, if this was just one day, right, then we would talk about it in that vein. But this has been throughout training camp. Now, I'm not saying every day at training camp he's having 5 or 6 plays like this, right? But I think just about every day at training camp, there have been 1 or 2 times that he has made an impact play or flashed or gotten behind the line of scrimmage, reset the line of scrimmage, etc. It's like day after day, oh, there's Geron Reid again. There's Geron Reid again. So he is off to a absolutely tremendous start. I am very bullish on what I think he can bring to the table this upcoming season, just what I've seen so far. We'll see what happens in preseason and regular season and so on and so forth, but just off to a very tremendous start. And again, his best day of training camp so far was on Monday on day 11 of practice. Another player who had a fantastic day was Ladarius Hamilton. Now, I didn't get to see a ton of Ladarius Hamilton. I was watching Geron Reid tear it up. I was watching some other things as well. But I will let Bill Huber, who wrote about Hamilton, I did see a couple of these plays, but I will let Bill Huber describe this best. Make sure to check him out in Sports Illustrated on the Packers site of Sports Illustrated. But this was Huber on Ladarius Hamilton. He probably would have had a sack prior to a Jordan Love pass that wound up being intercepted by Chris Barnes. On the next play, he wrecked an end around to receiver Ishmael Hyman. Later, he made 3 consecutive plays: a sack of Danny Etling against rookie offensive tackle Rasheed Walker, a stuff of running back BJ Baylor, and another tackle for loss. So that's a day for Ladarius Hamilton, right? So kudos to Bill Huber for picking all that up on Hamilton. But this is a player, if you remember, I've been semi-excited about, trying to sort of temper expectations a little bit. I don't think Ladarius Hamilton's going to go out and all of a sudden have this amazing season, right? But as I was watching edge rushers on every play a season ago, Ladarius was the guy who of Tipa and of Garvin and of all these random edge rushers that Green Bay, plotted out there through the course of the season that, didn't ultimately have much success. Chauncey Rivers, amongst others. Ladarius is the one who stood out to me. And there was in very minimal snaps, but I kept wondering why he wasn't the one that was getting a little bit more play, because I thought there was actually something there with Hamilton. And now he's fighting with Enigbare and Tipa and Randy Ramsey, etc. for getting snaps, but he continues to have days like that, and he is potentially not only going to wrap up a roster spot, but could find himself firmly in that number 3 edge rusher position. It was a fantastic day for him, and clearly, if you've noticed now, the 3 players that I highlighted, Jaire Alexander, defense, Geron Reid, defense, Ladarius Hamilton, defense, the defense was dominant all day on Monday. I lost track of how many coverage sacks that there were. And it was a couple things here, right? The coverage was fantastic. The coverage on the back end, quarterbacks, whether it was Etling, whether it was Love, whether it was Rodgers, could not find anywhere to throw the ball. But give the defensive line and the edge rushers credit for being relentless and continuing to work to the football and getting those coverage sacks, because a lot of times just because there's great coverage doesn't necessarily mean that the pass rushers are still getting home and making plays. This defense was continuing to rally to the football, continuing to make plays. And that was one of the big things that really stood out to me was even when the running backs maybe got a 3 or 4 yard gain, you would see this defense just swarm and rally to the football. And it was just a beautiful thing to watch. You can tell Joe Barry has this defense playing 11 to the ball, rallying to everything, not giving up on plays. It is a well-coached group that has a ton of talent, that is now finding some gems like Geron Reid and TJ Slayton, maybe a Ladarius Hamilton, etc. things are really coming together on the defensive side of the ball. And outside of day one, where the offense was the pretty clear winner, you could make an argument that the defense has won literally every day since then. So then the question that I have been getting a lot, and I think is a fair question to ask, is like, all right, Andy, how much of this is really good defense and how much of this is bad offense? And I think it's both. I think there's pieces of both. There's always going to be a gray area and somewhere in the middle, right? I will give a ton of credit to the defense. I think they're just playing really fantastic football, but I do have legitimate concerns of where the offense is at this point. We've seen some sloppiness. We've seen some drops. We've seen some picks. We've seen some offside, or false start penalties. We've seen some holding penalties. I don't think the offense is operating anywhere near its peak crispness yet. I think they have a lot of work to do just to get sort of on the same page and making sure that they're not making some of these mental mistakes. I think the offensive line has been mostly a mess. They are not generating anything in the run game, and they are struggling to hold up at the point of attack. And sometimes it's a slow burn for these defensive linemen. Sometimes the offensive linemen are, holding up a little bit, but overall, it's just been too leaky, and it hasn't been good enough when it specifically comes to running the football. And I do think there is a legitimate level of concern here. The other thing is I do think the wide receivers and playmakers have been an issue as well. It's been difficult for the offense to get explosive plays down the field. Romeo Dobbs has certainly been a revelation more often than not, but even a lot of those have been like sort of contested catch situations. I thought Allen Lazard had a fantastic first day of training camp and has sort of quieted down since then. Randall Cobb hasn't done a whole heck of a lot. Now he's been out a couple days, but he hasn't done a ton. So I do think that this offense right now, if you're going to struggle to run the football, that's going to limit two of your biggest playmakers in Dillon and Jones because your offensive line isn't quite what it needs to be. And if you're not getting those explosive plays down the field, it's just going to be a drag it out grind time after time after time. I think worse even than maybe what we saw last season, which was a drag it out grind time after time after time. Now, to be fair to the offense, this is an offense that has traded away the best wide receiver in football and is adjusting to that, and also is currently missing David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Christian Watson, and Robert Tonyan. If you would add those four players to any offense right now, I don't care if it's the Jets, I don't care if it's the Vikings, I don't care if it's the Cowboys, I don't care who it is. If I said, hey, tomorrow at practice, you're going to pick up David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Robert Tonyan, and Christian Watson, that is going to fundamentally change that offense. Those are four key pieces, not even to mention Kylan Hill amongst others, right? Like there's pieces here that are clearly missing for Green Bay, and four of them are insanely important pieces. So I do believe that once Green Bay is hopefully at its full capacity and has their two stud offensive linemen and gets a playmaking wide receiver in Christian Watson and gets their tight end number one in Robert Tonyan, I do think they're going to have answers to some of these questions, right? But as it stands right now, and importantly to note here that we don't know if or when David Bakhtiari is going to come back. We don't know when Elton Jenkins is going to come back. We don't know when Robert Tonyan is going to come back. We don't know when Christian Watson is going to come back. And I can tell you right now, if Green Bay goes into Minnesota with no Tonyan, no Watson, no Bakhtiari, and no Elton Jenkins, that game will be a very big struggle. And bet the under would be my very strong advice in that game. Because I think this offense is lacking in a little bit in playmaking, and it's just going to take these wide receivers a little bit more to uncover. And if you can't run the football, and that's not going to set up your play action, and you can't protect to hold up while those weapons are taking longer to uncover, there are going to be some issues offensively. So the answer to the question is the defense is playing great, but this offense has legitimate question marks, specifically along the offensive line, and we need to see a little bit more playmaking. So a long way to go. Like I said, some of those injury returns I think will answer a lot of those questions. But as of right now, there has been some bad offense, and it does need to get better. And more importantly, they got to clean up the mental stuff so that there's not these false starts, missed snaps, fumbles, interceptions, etc. The offense just hasn't been, very clean. And credit the defense, but the offense has certainly work to do as well. All right, let's run through the 2-minute drills. The number ones had the first opportunity. It was like 1:04 left around their own 30 to 35 yard line. One timeout, down by 7, had to go the length of the field. Rodgers worked the ball all the way down to the opponent's 27-yard line, the defense's 27-yard line, but basically had to run a hook and ladder at the end. There was only 9 seconds left. Didn't work. Defense gets the stop. Should have been stopped earlier. Stop me if you've heard this before. Another dropped interception by the defense. Devondre Campbell had a ball right to him and could not hang on to it, so the offense got another shot, but defense was still able to get off the field and make sure that number one offense did not get in the end zone. Basically stalled out again around like the 27. I guess with the hook and ladder, maybe they got up to like the 12 or something, but didn't matter. Defense won. And then Jordan Love had the opportunity, also got all the way down to the 28, 27-yard line of the defense. Amari Rodgers, a couple big plays, including a big fourth down completion to keep the ball moving and keep the drive rolling. But at the very end, Jordan Love, there was like 5 seconds left, and again around the 27-yard line, and just had to throw it in the end zone. Tried to force a pass inside. Keyshawn Nixon intercepts it and makes the win for the defense, and that was actually the play that closed out practice. Willing to give Jordan Love a little bit of accident forgiveness on that play simply because he has to take a shot in the end zone on that play. You're down 7 and there's 5 seconds left. You got to throw it somewhere. You can't take a sack. You can't, just throw it away. You got to give your offensive some sort of chance. So he tried to force a ball in. Keyshawn Nixon intercepts it. I don't know that it was probably maybe the best read on the play, but I couldn't look you in the eye and tell you that there was a better one either. So like I said, willing to forgive that pick because you just have to try to make a play in that situation. But I thought Love had a shaky practice. He had a pick that he threw directly to Chris Barnes. Don't know what he was seeing on the play. I think he just literally missed Barnes dropping into coverage. Thought he had his receiver coming on a crosser. This was a major issue for Love at Utah State. He did not always have vision of where he was throwing the football. He would make a read, and instead of reading what's coming in front, he would make the read over here and then throw the ball, not realizing that a linebacker, a defensive lineman, or a safety as a robber came down into coverage, and it would be an easy interception. That was something that plagued him in his junior year at Utah State. That was I think the scenario here. Barnes dropped into coverage. He was pressured on the play by Ladarius Hamilton. Don't think he ever felt Barnes dropping, threw it right to him, and it was a bad interception. There was another play where he gets pressured, and he decides to just loft, basically throwing up for grabs, fading away. The ball, basically floated in the air. He was lucky to have it fall incomplete. Had it stayed up longer, it would have been an interception, I think, pretty much for sure. The defender had a better opportunity for the ball than anyone on offense did. So just need to see a little bit better reads and a little bit better decision-making from Jordan Love. I thought it was a little bit of a tough day for him overall. Let's go over some of the logistics here. Mercedes Lewis sat out practice as a veteran rest day. Ty Summers was out with an illness. Randall Cobb stopped practicing midway through practice. It sounds like this was just a little bit rest and it was planned ahead of time, so no injury concerns for Randall Cobb at this time. Stephen Wordle went down hurt after a long snap and trying to get downfield on a punt. Looked like it was something leg related. He went off to the sideline. I did not see him return. I don't think he returned, but that'll be an injury worth keeping an eye on. Rico Gafford and Isaiah Mcduffie both went down with injury. They seemed to be injured at some point. Mcduffie stayed right in the play and didn't come out at all. Gafford went out for a few plays. It looked like he maybe got his ankle taped, and then he was right back in there as well. So hopefully they're good to go moving forward. David Bakhtiari, some potential good news there. He was with the rehab group for a bit. Don't glean too much from it. And I don't even know, I should preface this here by saying it's tough to tell if he was actually with the actual rehab group, if he was just kind of off to his side doing his own thing. I tend to believe it was a little bit more the latter, but this was only the second time in camp that we've seen him doing anything outside with the team and working in any capacity. So hopefully this becomes a bit more regular and he gets more involved with the rehab group, and that would be a step in the right direction. But either way, it was great to see Bakhtiari doing anything because, again, that's only the second time we've seen him doing work on the outside in all of training camp so far. The other note is Darnell Savage is not likely to return this week per Matt LaFleur, so don't expect him to return to practice anytime soon, although recall that this is, that he already noted, Savage and LaFleur, that this is not expected to be a long-term issue. Your full did not practice list included Ty Summers, Mercedes Lewis, Innis Gaines, Darnell Savage, David Bakhtiari, Osiris Mitchell, Christian Watson, Elton Jenkins, Kylan Hill, Robert Tunyon, Cole Schneider, and Mason Crosby. Your offensive line from left to right, Yash Nijman, John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, Jake Hansen, and Royce Newman. Zach Tom also saw some time with the ones. The offensive line, I think, struggled once again, so they've got to figure out what is going to be their best grouping here and how they can make that work because, as mentioned earlier, it's been a struggle so far. I thought the defensive line was dominant all day long. Devontae Wyatt had a couple nice pressures. Kenny Clark was resetting the line of scrimmage and was very immovable in the center of that defense. TJ Slayton had a stop in the backfield, and we already talked about Geron Reid with his massive day. So really big day for the defensive line. Amari Rodgers, I thought, had one of his better days. Completely beat Shamar Jean-Charles on one-on-ones on a deep ball. That was an impressive play. Had the couple catches in the 2-minute drill from Jordan Love that kept the drive moving. So I think there was one other one in there as well. But a really nice day for Amari Rodgers. That was a nice step in the right direction. Special teams had some issues. Ishmael Hyman muffed 2 punts, which is you never want to see. Rasul Douglas came through and I think what would have been probably a blocked punt. So some protection issues there on that punt that he held up on. Pat O'Donnell sort of shanked it to the right under pressure. There were multiple long snapping issues. So a long, long way to go for the special teams yet. As I mentioned the other day, I love what this coaching staff is doing. The attention to detail is amazing, but there still is a lot to clean up for a unit that was so bad a season ago and is still trying to break out of some of those bad habits. As mentioned earlier, Romeo Dobbs had a little bit of a rookie day. He was the only one who actually, he got shut down by Jaire Alexander on his first route against Alexander. And then on his second one, he was the only one to actually get uncovered against Alexander, meaning he beat Alexander up top on a route, got to the top of his route, separated, which is so rare against Jair. So this again tells you what Romeo's capable of. But top of the route, beautiful ball to him, beats Alexander, does all the hard work, and then drops the pass. And that's been a little bit of an issue for Romeo Dobbs so far, is for all the spectacular things that he's done, he's got probably about 5 drops in the last week and a half or so. So that is something that he needs to continue to work on. It did show its head at Nevada from time to time, the drops. He cleaned it up his last season, but needs to continue to work on it. But that was a pretty bad drop again, and he did all the hard work. He was amazing. He uncovered from Jair, got separation, beat his man deep, and then unfortunately just dropped the football. The other issue is in the 2-minute drill. I'm sure you guys probably remember this, but what Rodgers likes to do sometimes, instead of going for the spike, if he sees the corner playing off on one of the sides, what he'll do is he'll have the wide receiver run a quick out route, and in that situation, he'll throw the out route and basically pick up 4 or 5 yards and get out of bounds rather than just spike the ball and wait for the next 2nd and 10 or 3rd and 10 or whatever it is, right? So he was looking on this play, corners off. He's expecting Dobbs to run the quick out instead. So he fakes the spike and he looks out there, and Dobbs wasn't looking for it at all. So Dobbs, kind of owned it after, and Rodgers pointed to the sideline, basically telling him to get out and have a new receiver come in. He goes out, Juwan Winfrey comes in. Dobbs was back in there a couple plays later. I know that people will probably be like, oh, this is like Rodgers being a jerk. That's what you want from your leader. That's what you want. And Dobbs understood. Dobbs isn't going to dwell on it. He was back in there 2 plays later, and he'll get that rapport with Rodgers. But, that was a rookie moment, and he had a couple of those on Monday. So nothing to crush the guy. He's still doing phenomenal work, but that was one of the days where you just pick up those things, you learn from it, you be better the next day, and I have no doubt that Dobbs will tomorrow. Packers did release their unofficial depth chart, so you can check that out online. No major takeaways, and it's unofficial, so don't glean too much into it, but it's always kind of fun to see that first depth chart. And then the other news or noteworthy, I guess, item is that the Packers worked out Dexter Williams, former Packers running back out of Notre Dame, former 6th-round pick. They worked him out. Remember, they got a preseason game coming up on Friday. They're not going to play Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon in that game. And Patrick Taylor is beat up at the moment a little bit, not going through full drills and everything like that. So that could mean right now that only Goodson and Baylor are healthy and ready to play. If that's the case, if Patrick Taylor's not ready to go, I would expect them to pick up a running back prior to Friday, so they have 3 running backs to go into that game. You don't want to go in with just 2 running backs. So we'll see if Patrick Taylor can get ready to play prior to the game. If he can't, look for Green Bay to pick up a running back. Maybe that's Dexter Williams, maybe it's not, but noteworthy that they tried him out nonetheless. That is going to do it for me today. A ton of takeaways. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. It just takes a second, and I would appreciate it greatly. But I'll be right back here tomorrow with another breakdown of practice. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.